The figures are interesting, aren't they, Nerida, after all the negative thoughts from people saying that the property market was going to fall through the floorboards. 80%, is it 80% of residential properties
80%.
across Australia have seen an increase?
Yeah, it's quite incredible, 80% of suburbs. So really Sydney is standing out the most. 95% of suburbs are now seeing price growth.
It is unbelievable. As Tim was saying, there was a bit of a surprise, but we're also seeing a surprise in the rental market as well.
Yeah, so pricing is going up a lot. You know, we can see that, pretty much everywhere we are seeing price increases. But if we go to the rental market, only a third of suburbs in capital cities are seeing rental price increases. So there is this incredible disconnect that we're seeing. On one hand, an incredibly weak rental market, but on the other hand, very, very low cost of debt is really firing up the property market in terms of pricing.
With the rental market, is there any sign that that may change with the easing of restrictions pretty much across the whole country? I mean, we'd almost have to forget about the restrictions in Western Australia because we haven't seen any real tangible signs that things will change there. But in other parts like Victoria, pretty much COVID-free, New South Wales and the Queensland border opening?
Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over coming months. I mean, the big issue is that we have seen very high levels of job loss amongst young people. And, you know, if you look at the hospitality sector, you look at education, tourism, that's really been where the majority of problems have been. So really the key to getting the rental market back on track is getting people back to work. And the employment numbers that came out a couple of weeks ago did show very, very strong conditions with employment growth, so far stronger than anyone predicted. So that's one issue. The other issue is getting foreign students back. So some of the markets that have been most affected are those that are very reliant on foreign students. And look, at this stage, that's the big risk factor. We don't know when they'll come back, primarily because Australia is COVID-free pretty much, whereas if you have a look at the rest of the world, it is still ripping through quite badly.
Darwin real estate agents said that they're seeing a remarkable turnaround, Nerida, with prices rising up to 15% in the last 3 months after such a decline.
Yeah, look, Darwin's been a very, very tough market. I mean, we saw, obviously, Perth did very badly after the end of the mining boom, but Darwin was also badly affected. Perth was a bit quicker in terms of recovery, but what we are starting to see is some positive signs in that market. So, you know, at this stage, across the city, prices are growing minimally. You know, it's not a runaway growth market, but you can see there that there are some places that are doing really well. So Muirhead and Berrima are both seeing very, very strong growth. I mean, Berrima is quite interesting. It's actually where the Dondale Correctional Facility is and the Darwin Prison. So, you know, when you start to see prison suburbs do quite well, it's generally quite surprising and does show the market is starting to take off.
Nerida, it's hard to say a positive word about stamp duty. None of us like it. It's just one of those taxes that has just been a bit of a millstone, and it's been difficult for people to get into the market because of stamp duty. But we're seeing in both New South Wales and a little bit in Victoria some progressive thoughts in this area.
Yeah, look, it's quite incredible. I mean, now is really the time to do major reforms in terms of taxation, and both the New South Wales government and Victorian government have come out with announcements in their budgets around stamp duty and what their potential changes are to it. So right now, the New South Wales government is going through a series of community consultations to work out the exact way to introduce it. Victoria's done it slightly differently. They are giving a cut to stamp duty up until June. So it will be applied to prices under $1 million. So they have been restricted in terms of who gets the stamp duty cut. But very good news for the economy. I mean, we know that transactions are more likely to take place if stamp duty doesn't exist. Also that people do tend to move into more appropriate accommodation. So, you know, there's lots and lots of benefits. But I think for New South Wales, it will be a period of transition up from now until June when it's introduced. That, you know, there will be a little bit of uncertainty, but overwhelmingly good news that governments are moving to this measure.
And we're running out of time, but just quickly, Nerida, what about the growth in German and UK funds into Australian commercial property?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting looking at commercial property transactions. We are seeing a lot of money coming out of the UK and Germany at the moment. So given that there's not many places to invest that aren't COVID-free, Australia does look very, very attractive to a lot of the really big offshore pension funds. What is interesting, the US and Chinese investors are barely active. So they tend to be investing elsewhere. A lot of the US funds investing into China at the moment. So some interesting changes there, but definitely commercial property transactions are very, very strong going into 2021.
And that's a real positive foreign investment story, isn't it? If we can get more money from those parts of the world.
Yeah, look, it's definitely. I mean, there is a bit of, a lot of arguments around foreign investment in Australia, but we can see that for commercial property, it is overwhelmingly good news. Also, good news that there is a lot of confidence in Australia that investors do see Australia as a growth market, an economic growth market, despite a lot of problems in the commercial property sector, particularly rising vacancies in office and retail. It is seen as Australia is seen as such a great place to be.
Always great to hear your expert advice and opinions. Nerida Conisbee, Chief Economist at REA Group. See you next week.
See you then.